Welcome to Home Education Matters, the weekly podcast supporting you on your home education journey. Hello, and today I am joined by Claire, Veronica and Kate, and we are going to be talking about how to home educate and run a business at the same time, because it is a very special beast, I think, being able to do both, because you're obviously home education is very full-time, and then doing anything else is reasonably full-time. And so juggling those two and dovetailing them together. So we thought today we would kind of, try to explain how we do it a little bit. And some of us don't do it very well, looking at me here, because I always feel like I'm dropping things rather than spinning my plates in the air. So let us start with Claire. Claire, would you like to tell us a little bit about your home education journey, but also your home education business and how that dovetails together?
That's a really interesting segue, because I have two websites. I've just recently split them because they weren't making sense as one business anymore. And one of them is called Spin My Plates, and which is exactly what you just said. And the other one is the Easy Website Club, which I think, speaks for itself, really. So my home ed journey really came out of a journey of trying to get a diagnosis for something that was happening with my son, and becoming more and more disillusioned with the whole process of hospitals and schools and how they treated us during that process. And it's not the people in them, it was the process and the way it was all just created, the red tape, the stress and the length of time. So it took us, my son has a form of Tourette's called chronic tic disorder. He probably has ADHD as well. He certainly has all the symptoms, but we are too traumatized by the first diagnosis to go through another one now. So we're just leaving it. He's okay at the moment. But the hospital had sent recommendations to the school for things that would help him on this journey. And the school wouldn't do them because they hadn't written the letter correctly. And so I had to go back to the hospital and say, can you change how you write the letter? And they're like, no, we can't write anymore because he's been discharged. And it just, none of the things that were advised were done. There was budget issues and he just wasn't supported, even though the school were genuinely really lovely. They just didn't have the permissions or money or whatever to support him.
I'm guessing what you found was a kind of, you were in between two huge megaliths, the education system and the health system, and the two weren't talking together and you were sort of stuck in the middle.
It's almost like they're fighting each other as well, and you're stuck in the middle. And when you have something that's going on that's really impacting on your life, and you're a primary age child and nobody seems to know what to do, it's quite unsettling. And he didn't feel safe. And he didn't feel cared for, and his mental health started to decline. I was already self-employed, so I knew I could be flexible with my work. I didn't choose to have my own business because of home ed. I chose to home ed because I had my own business. So I could. It was a slightly different way round. But I wanted him to complete primary school because I thought that things might change, and then COVID happened. And things just went really spiraled downhill, like to the extent where he was doing things like bashing his head really hard against a wall to make the tics stop and stuff like that. And it was just really traumatic. And I was just like, I can't keep making this child go to school where he's miserable.
No,
just wasn't learning. He was spending all his time outside of the classroom or in the headmaster's office, because that was easier than being in this overwhelming environment with all the noise. He didn't used to cope well with those sorts of things. So I've pulled him out of school. We've been home editing for, since the beginning of the pandemic, basically. I just didn't enroll him in a secondary school. And we have taken our home ed journey real slow. So anything that seems like school or feels a bit lessony is completely rejected. So we're largely unschooling, and I'm gently trying to introduce things at the side without calling it education or school or lesson or anything like that. And we're just exploring the world together. And he is a different child. And everyone who knows him has remarked on how much he's changed and how much more confident he is and how much more knowledge he seems to have about things I've never taught him. So he can tell you all the different makes and models of all the aeroplanes in the world just from a silhouette of the aeroplane. And I have never talked about aeroplanes. So
it's funny how they get into these things, because my son for years would go to sleep with a really big, thick textbook of battleships. And like, there's nothing he didn't know about battleships. And then you think, in a school, like, they would do battleships for like one lesson, one time in primary, and then never again. And you think, all these poor children who have this like burning love of a subject, they'd get like one afternoon maybe doing it in a school, and then after that they wouldn't be allowed to look at it again.
Yeah, he's explored so much more. He's been able to learn so much more tagged onto the side. I was so nervous about the idea of unschooling. I never told anyone that's what I was doing. I kept it a secret, even from my partner.
Really?
Education today. Oh, yeah, we've done loads.
Because it's working, and you've clearly got demonstrable evidence that your son is thriving. Are you more open now about, this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it?
I think because unschooling is still treated as a radical idea to people who don't understand homeschooling, home education, let alone unschooling. I don't always say how I'm doing it. It depends who I'm talking to.
In the home ed community, you must get lots of support, because I find that it's not a radical idea in home ed, is it?
No, not at all. Yeah, I don't have any problems talking about it with people who know.
And so did you carry on with the same workload that you did sort of like when your child was in school? Did you carry that on when they were out of school, or did you sort of bring your workload down, or did you sort of refine how you approached work?
So that's a difficult question to answer, because I think my workload would have changed regardless. So during that time that we were trying to get his diagnosis and I was struggling with getting him into school, I was also at the beginning of a 5-year journey to recover from PTSD. So my mind health, and I'd had a lot of things that had happened. I think I've lost count. It was like 7 or 9 close people to me passed away in a 2-year period. And my son was ill. We had problems with the school. I was in a very difficult relationship at the time that I needed to escape from. And so home life was a bit awful. Just everything was topsy-turvy. And I was running 3 businesses and not doing any of them very well. And what I realised now looking back is that what I was doing was throwing myself into work in order to try and pretend nothing else was going wrong anywhere. And so as I started to recover, I realised that wasn't sustainable, and I closed them and started a different one.
Oh, so you closed all your businesses and started a new one?
Yeah. And that was a really difficult decision, because I felt like a failure. But I needed the headspace. I needed some breathing time, and I couldn't juggle. I couldn't spin all the plates, which is where Spin My Plates ended up coming from. And it was actually my therapist who needed a website building, who said to me, but you know how to do this, don't you? But you don't offer it as a service. And I'm like, yeah, I've just done it for fun, because I'm a bit of a geek, a bit of a tech geek. And she said, well, would you do mine? I need a website. And I said, yeah, sure, why not? Is anything to repay you. I felt like she'd saved my life. And that just ended up blossoming into her going to networking and saying, oh, I know this person who built my website. You should get in contact with her.
So for you, the two things dovetail quite nicely, because you refined your business down to one business, or 2 businesses, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's what was weird, how things developed, because as I was doing more and more of that, people were coming to me saying they wanted a website, and I was asking them why, and no other web developer had ever done that. So I was going, okay, what do you want it to do? This is a lot of money to spend. Have you thought it through? What's your marketing plan? And they're like, I don't know. I was just told I have to tick this box and say I've got a website. I've got business cards. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. It's what I should do. And I don't like the word should, because we should all over ourselves. It makes a really big mess, and it's difficult to clean up. So I ended up accidentally coaching people in their business. So I did an accredited coaching course, because I thought, gosh, I'm doing this job now and I'm not trained in it, and I want to join a professional association, make sure I'm doing it right. So I did that, and so I've been doing business coaching and websites and marketing and stuff for I think probably about 3 years now. It's the same amount of time I've been home editing, basically. And then just recently, some of that has branched off into a form of life coaching that I've been using on myself to reverse my negative thought patterns that make me depressed and trigger my PTSD. So I've learned some of these techniques, and I'm wanting to teach other people them, because it might help them if they can't afford therapy, or they've been doing therapy but now need the tools to go forward with. So that's just kind of literally a couple of months ago has morphed into that. So I've had to separate the two, because the life coaching and the business stuff doesn't really seem to, it didn't work together on one website, so I've built two.
In actual fact, that what you say there about reversing negative thought patterns is exactly what I specialize in as a life coach.
Fabulous.
Small world. So let's move on to Kate. Kate, would you like to tell us a little bit about how your business and home education life dovetails, or whether it doesn't, and how you've got to where you are today?
Yes, absolutely. It does dovetail 100%. In fact, our whole lifestyle and life was designed around wanting to home educate and unschool our children. When I always wanted to home ed my kids before I even had children or was pregnant. It was kind of a dream of mine. And then my partner was a secondary school teacher in London, in a really rough inner city school. And he really experienced, it was a secondary school, but he was seeing so many children coming through to secondary school having been failed by the whole primary school system. And that just confirmed that there was no way, if we could avoid it, our children were going to go to school. So then as soon as our first son was born, we were still living in London, and we were like, okay, this is the catalyst. We need to make a change. We kind of threw everything out the window, tried to think about what we actually wanted our lives to be around, what our values were. And we kind of pieced together a life that we could create where we could just, our values of spending time as a family, being out in nature, and just having joy and kind of having the freedom to do what we wanted to do. So we ended up buying a property with my parents, which wasn't even on the cards 6 months before. It was just kind of something that just came together. So we bought a property, moved back to Norfolk, which is where I was from, and left our jobs. And then we actually, on the property, we've got 20 acres. And so kind of part of the plan was to set up a glamp site so that our kids could come along with us. So when they were babies, they'd just be there with us while we were prepping the accommodation. I'd just be breastfeeding, and then they'd be polishing cutlery, and we'd just be there together as a family, all working. We go and coppice our woods together as a family. My youngest, when he was 2 weeks old, he came down in a sling with me just to manage the woodland. And so it kind of, there isn't really a difference between our home ed and our life. We've just meshed it all together. So yeah, we can just be really flexible. We live in a multi-generational household. So we have grandparents, and they have just the most amazing, strong bond with their grandparents. And actually, it wasn't on the plan, but 2 months after we moved back to Norfolk, my in-laws moved from up north to be in Norfolk because they wanted to be near their grandkids. So we have both lots of grandparents really close by, and just being kind of a constant support for the kids and for us, which is just so beautiful. And it wasn't anything that I could have kind of designed, but it just has happened.
Do you think that having your both sets of grandparents close by has been helpful for you to be able to run your business as well as unschool the children?
Yes, it has. They're a crucial part of it. We wanted to raise our children amongst as much of a village as we could. That's kind of one of those things, like, I think we're designed to do that, but our modern society doesn't allow us to. So we didn't quite know it would look like it does, but we wanted to be close, and we wanted to have grandparents and family as part of our like weekly life, just kind of always around. So yeah, each sets of grandmas have our boys 1 day a week. So they're now fully on board with the unschooling, and just like love it. It's been a lot of kind of it's taken a lot of conditioning or unconditioning for them, and thinking through our whole process and being really open, because it's quite confronting to not only have grandchildren that are being unschooled, but to live with them and to kind of be immersed in that world. And our whole lives are just normally set up around kind of control-based parenting and school. So yeah, that's been really interesting to observe, and to see the great bond that my kids have with my parents, especially my dad, who was working so much when I was a kid, didn't have the time to spend with us and didn't connect in that way. And now he's kind of doing it with the next generation, which is really beautiful.
Do you find that in some way difficult as a child who perhaps didn't get that attention from your parents? Do you find that then, do you sort of look at the way they are with your children and think, 30 years too late for me, kind of thing?
I have done, for sure. But now, 8 years down the line, it's just more gratitude. Grateful that I can create this life for my kids and give them that bond and that connection with their grandparents. One of their, my partner's dad died when my oldest was 2 and my youngest was 4 months old. And so that was like a real reminder of how important this relationship is with their other 3 grandparents. They were so young and they didn't get to really know him. So yeah, it's just gratitude now. Just although obviously living with your mum, it can be a little bit frustrating.
That's because they're always right about things and it's really annoying.
Always right. Yes, they've got their ways of doing things and any other way is not right. Yeah, it's been interesting. Well, I went to boarding school when I was 15. From not living with my parents from 15 to then moving in, kind of buying a place with them at 30 has been really a really interesting journey.
I feel like there's a whole unspoken story behind that of working through things. It's funny because I have these conceptions of London, and I have 2 conceptions of London, and one is that the schools are very good there. The state schools are very good in London because there's lots of academies and lots of money. And my other conception is, and I say conception because they're possibly misconceptions. My other preconception of London is that it's very, very easy to home educate there because there's a lot of home educators based there and lots of activities and events. Did you at any point sort of question whether you were making the right move, or have you ever looked back and thought, wow, we're a bit isolated here, or look at all these things going on in London, or anything like that?
No, I haven't actually. We didn't choose to move to Norfolk because there's a strong home ed community here. We moved here because this is where both me and Seb met at boarding school, and it's where I was born and spent kind of the early years of my life. But actually now, 8 years down the line, I know so many people that have chosen Norfolk because it's got such a strong home ed community. So it's really beautiful that actually what means home to me has got that. I think what I find when I see people in London is that it's so big. And this is what we found having just friends in London. It would take you an hour at the least to get to see those friends. So actually, there is a massive home ed community in London, and there's massive everything in London because there's just so many more people. But I don't think that we would have found the kind of home ed community that we found here in the same way. I think it would have been harder. And the school system, the school that my partner worked at was a struggling school. It was on special measures when he arrived, and then when he left 3 years later, it was outstanding. And so his experience of that was that it was just all about pressure on the kids, ticking boxes, just pushing things, new ideas every time they went home from work. There'd be something else that they had to do and put in place for the next day, and it was just stressful. I think it was just all about metrics and not about children at all. As well, in London, there's so many schools to choose from. So maybe some people have the really good ones and this was not.
Maybe. I'm not. Obviously, most home educators are not great believers that there are brilliant schools anywhere. But there's certainly, I suppose there's better schools than other schools. But realistically, it's still a school system, isn't it? And when you're unschooling, it's the opposite of the school system. I mean, that's literally what it means. So it's interesting that we've had 2 unschoolers. And I had another misconception, clearly, that I thought it would be very difficult to run your own business and unschool, because obviously the whole point of unschooling is that you're extremely responsive to your child. And I thought, how do you do that and fit that around a business? So maybe we'll come to that, but I want to see whether we're going to get a full house and whether Veronica is also an unschooler. Oh, Claire, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was like, it's all right being very responsive to your child, but when they're a teenager, it's getting them to be responsive back. So it's not always them.
So true. Or they don't respond for 3 months and then they respond with a certain amount of fury, and it's like, where did this come from? You can go back to your room now, it's all good, you can go. Yeah. We've talked. We're done. Okay, so that's not true. I love my teens are wonderful, but they have their own challenges for certain, there's no doubt about it. Okay, now Veronica, please tell me we've got a full house, although I'm not an unschooler, so I'm afraid I'm still ruining things. But Veronica, tell me, are you an unschooler?
I mean, I must say that because my children are a lot older than all of you, so they're now one's going to be 18, and another one is 16, going to be 16 this year. So they're both at college. The older one dropped a year. So we were living overseas when they were little. So I did a lot of research about, home education, homeschooling, unschooling. And because we were living in a quite an isolated town, a small area, so we had quite a lot of limitations. And so in terms of home education, unschooling or not, I wasn't fully unschooling because I felt I did not have the courage and say, okay, I'm just going to dive in. I mean, I didn't have networks, around me, but I love the idea of giving that freedom and following children's interests. And we certainly had that because we were living in a small town and we could travel and, just incorporating that. I was with the kids because husband was working. And so we did a lot of that. We did a lot of, going out, exploring at museums, cultures and things like that. But because we were living in a non-English speaking environment, so I sort of made sure that we kept up with that. So did that in the primary years. But when it came to secondary, that's when I thought, goodness, if I'm going to prepare them to come back to the UK and slot back in into the system, then we needed to be thinking. So that's when began to do some subjects with online schooling. But our lifestyle allowed us to have that much more freedom. So we lived in a community that was very much, people were very relaxed and they loved it. These people would drop in and say, oh, I was just in the neighborhood, and no such thing as calling up. And the kids were, oh, auntie's here, we can miss school and not do our work and stuff. And it'd be a time to socialize and play and, listen to conversations, or I'd make a meal and things like that. So we had those opportunities. And I think because of our context, there were quite a lot of needs, and I was involved in some community projects. So the kids got to, be involved in that. So they were like, one was 10, another one was 8, and there was a massive flood in our town. And just doing relief work in that way. And then we got involved in food banks, local sort of charity food banks, because the society didn't have the network or the infrastructure, social infrastructure to support a lot of these social issues and problems that were there. So there were a lot of people doing voluntary work, and the kids got involved and they met all these people. So that sort of incorporating that sort of more, giving the children opportunities, exploring their interests and finding out and giving them that freedom, working alongside making sure that they were sort of ready to sit, GCSEs. And then we came back. So we came back, and that was in the middle of COVID. And my younger child, he just needed that academic stimulation. I mean, he's very interested. He's very quick, and he's very much more into the maths and the science, and completely not my area. And so he started really well back in the local school, and he's done really well. And he's doing art as well as the maths. And I'm pleased for him. It was the right decision for him. And for my older son, went into college. And so in that last year, in that year when he was transitioning, just before he went to college, that's when I started my home ed creatives, started just offering art classes. And it's just grown from there. So it was a really nice transition. So I never had a business or was earning money or had a business when we were home educating. But this sort of really was a nice flow, and still being able to be connected with the home ed community, homeschooling community, not just in the UK, but, some contacts around in other parts of the world. And so that's my journey.
So what you did was actually you home educated while you were living abroad. And then as your children transitioned into college, that's when you transitioned back into the work world.
That's right. And I felt that with the way I do my art classes, and it's not just art. I mean, I've got art and stories, so but integrating literacy. And I was just in a conversation with another parent about art and math. So I've taken a lot of the things that I've sort of gleaned from my home education years
It's interesting because I'm guessing that you felt that while you were full-time home educating and living abroad, that it would have been difficult to pursue your business, or was it just something that you weren't really ready for personally?
I suppose, yeah, I wanted to be there because there were challenges living there. I wanted to be there for the kids. I guess for me, I just wanted to really give them an experience, be with them, just to have that capacity to support them, to support the family, and also to be involved in our community, because we were living in quite a small town, and there were opportunities and, to be involved locally. And I thought this was a great opportunity for the children to see, to just really immerse ourselves in a different culture. But I was also conscious that because we were living there we had felt that we wanted to stay there for quite a significant amount of time. Somebody, either my husband or myself, needed to be someone that would really be there for the kids, commit to that, and be thinking about things, education and helping them with the transitioning, so that they would, when they come back, when they make that transition, they feel, it's as easy as, not easy, but it'll be one that is, they can embrace quite willingly and support them in that, especially as we were coming back when they were a bit older.
That's very interesting what you say, Veronica, because that leads me to a question for Claire and Kate, because what I did was I home educated all the way through, and then I started my business as the children got older, when I felt that I had more time to myself. And so that felt then that I was able to dedicate time to the children and then dedicate time to my business. But what I've noticed is, as my business has got busier in the last couple of years, there are times when I go to bed at night, and that time when you're in bed and all the dark thoughts come to you. And I think all this time during the day, 3-4 hours during the day, I didn't make sure that my daughter went out for a walk, even though it was sunny. I didn't check in on my son, who's doing his A-levels from home, just to make sure that he's all right. I didn't sort of make sure that my daughter sat her mock paper, so that's going to have to go over to the next day. And in some ways, I feel that I'm not doing as good a job as a parent as I was before I started working. I feel like little things sort of drop through the cracks that didn't before. Like Veronica says, when she was home educating, she felt that one parent needed to really focus 100% on the children. And I'm not able to do that now because I'm working alongside. And I wonder if either of you two ever feel that. Do you ever go to bed and think, I'm not putting my all into home education, or I'm not putting my all into parenting in some ways because I'm working? Claire, you go. Tell us.
All the bloody time.
Thank God it's not just me.
I said to my partner last night, I said, I'm really sort of torn between two parts of me. I said, one is the one that just wants to be honest about all of the worry that I do, and the other one is the one that wants to present this lovely
you can do it all.
This is superhero thing. And I guess that, and I said, I just think I'm just going to be honest. And I said, I guess that actually it's just both. It's amazing and superhero and worrying and difficult for me all at the same time.
Kate, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely experienced that. Quite often over the years. But I would also say for us, because we're in a 2-parent family, neither of us wanted one of us to be out working and one of us to be just parenting, even when the children were newborn and we kind of, maternity leave time. Yeah, our vision was for both parents to be fully connected to the children and spending kind of as much as we could, equal amounts of time. So for us, it was about designing our life around that. So within 6 months of moving to Norfolk, my partner had quit his job in teaching, and we went full-time, both of us, into running the Glamp site. And then we've been able to split our time as much as we can between us both having quality time with the kids, kind of leading our unschooling lives, and us both having work time. So like right now, my partner's taken the kids to a multi-sports class in a local park, and then they get the whole day together. They often go to the beach and just spend the day kind of doing whatever, or come home in the afternoon and do project time. And then my full day with them is Thursday, and we kind of just have different rhythms for our week, so that one parent isn't spending 5 days a week trying to home educate them and do the childcare and run a business. And I think that's how we've managed to make it sustainable for us. But I know that's not an option for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I still worry. I mean, no matter, I think in terms of not worrying, oh goodness, I mean, the kind of worry, it's just tremendous every night, and things that you do. And I think it is a process, and it is a shock. I think it was a huge shock to see that transition. I mean, the teenage years, and then things, and no matter how much I might have poured into them, and there are things that they still feel that out of teenage emotions, think, oh, we didn't do this, or I didn't do that. And I think, like, you had this opportunity to go X, Y, and Z and whatever, and so, yeah, I think it's just, I think for me, I think it's just extending, giving them the permission to express, and giving myself the permission to feel that, yeah, it is hard and it is worrying. And it will always be mums, right? I mean, whatever, whether they're 50 or they're 5, we'll still be their mums. Yeah, it's been a privilege. I mean, even the ups and downs, the times when I was tired, times when I lost it, lots, and it's been, I mean, whatever it is, I guess what I'm trying to say is, whatever the situation, whatever whether it's conflict or whether it's great times, is doing life together, isn't it?
We interrupt this broadcast to remind you to like and subscribe to our podcast. And don't forget to join our Home Education Matters Facebook group, where you can find details on all our podcasts, any links or resources mentioned, chat to our guests, request upcoming podcasts, and even come on the podcast yourself. Do join us over there. Kate and then Claire, I think you had things to say.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that just comes as part of being a parent. Whatever you do, you worry. I think you've got this massive responsibility of other people's lives, and as much freedom as you can give them, you're still making decisions for them just from where you live and what you're choosing. Whether you send them to school, whether you home educate, whether you run a business, whether you dedicate all of your time to home educating, unschooling, whatever it is, there's always like decisions that you're making, and it's so hard. When I first became a parent, my friends were asking, like, why is it so stressful? And I was like, you're literally making like a million decisions every day for somebody else. Everything you say, you feel like, was that the right thing to say? Did I say it patiently enough? You're not perfect. You're doing what you think is best with what you've got right now. And yeah, for each of us, that's what we've done.
Yes.
Claire, go on. You were going to say
yeah,
something.
I can't remember what it was that made me think it, but I completely agree with Kate. I think, I was worrying when my son was at school and he was happy there at that, there was a point when that was all smooth, and things looked great, but I remember worrying then anyway. But I just wanted to pick up on something that you said earlier, Eleanor, which reminded me of a mindset change that I put myself through recently, which is I thought of it as, I'm doing a full-time job. I'm doing a full-time looking after the home because my partner's at work all the time. And I'm doing full-time home education, and it just made everything feel overwhelming. And so I've been actively trying to shift that mindset to, I'm doing all 3 of these things, rather than trying to spin all the plates and one of them always dropping. I'm just doing this one plate for a bit, then this other plate for a bit. And they're all integrated. So every time I'm working and every time I'm cleaning the house, my son is still learning from that about, the having a responsibility to look after yourself and to provide for your home and things like that. So I don't feel like he's missing out when I'm not doing things directly with him anymore. But I did all the time. And so I just look at it now as I have a full-time life with these 3 things that we do at different various stages for different amounts of time. And I've really kind of forgiven myself. Don't look at any of it as full-time anymore, because I found that too overwhelming, just personally.
If you take that analogy, and I think it is a really helpful analogy of the plate spinning, one thing I wanted to ask, particularly the unschoolers, is because you're obviously in an unschooling household, and even although I'm not an unschooler, I am what's called, an autonomous sort of home educator. So my children decide sort of what they want to do when. Do you find when you've got these multiple plates spinning, does one trump the other? Is one plate more important than the other plates? And if you have a conflict between what your child wants and what your business needs and maybe what you need, is there one that trumps another, or do you try to keep all of them in balance? Who wants to go first with that?
There's no such thing as balance, is there? I think it's just different things take different priorities at different times, and it's finding that flow between all of the different parts of your life and trying to not like get too stressed that you're not putting time into one thing while you're focused on something else, knowing that like the time will come when you do that, as long as you've got a clear idea of what's important to you. And like if running a business is important to you, you won't actually drop it long term permanently.
I've got a difficult question for you, Kate. Sorry about that. My question is this. If your children weren't spending 2 days a week with their grandparents, would you be able to run your business as you are doing? And if you were a single parent, would you be able to do it? And my next one would be, got all these scenarios, if you had to put them into a childcare setting in order to run your business, would you still feel that that all these things were sort of like vaguely balanced, or at least spinning? The plates were spinning still.
Okay, so I'll tackle the first one. Yes, I do think that we could home educate and unschool our children and run the businesses that we run while not having the grandparents supporting. That was actually the reason for having the business, the Glamp site, on our property, so that we could be like the kids. There's often times when we were working and my parent, like me and Seb, would have the kids. My parents would be off the property and the kids would just be playing football outside, but we'd be within distance. There'd be times where we would put one of them down for a nap in the bedroom, put the monitor on. We got a long distance monitor, 150 meters. We'd be down in the yurts, prepping them, greeting guests with a child in a sling. So fully, that is just a bonus that enriches our lives, but doesn't stop us from doing the kind of making the choices that we want to make. If I was a single parent, was that the next one? I think so. It was a single parent. I think it would. It's hard to know because I've never been a single parent, but it would be harder. I think there would be a lot more challenges. I think that I probably wouldn't now be setting up another business as well as the Glamp site. I think that would
so be... like Claire, you would simplify things in order to reflect your circumstances, right?
Yeah, I think I'm born to be an entrepreneur. I can't kind of I have such a desire in me, and I don't like being told what to do, and I like to have that freedom to make my own decisions and take control of my life. Boarding
school must have been a riot then.
Oh my goodness. Yes, it was awful. I moved from living in the Caribbean where my parents were at the time to being sent back to England to boarding school to it was like a prison. I was just surrounded by, it was awful.
Traumatic.
Actually, I just wrote a letter to my parents last week talking about the trauma that I experienced at 15.
Yeah.
It was a year of crying pretty much all the time.
Of course. Yeah.
I think that was like a kind of a catalyst as well. I was like, there's no way my children are going to school. And then within a year, my parents moved to North America and they homeschooled with kind of curriculum-based schooling, but my younger brother for a year over there. And I was like,
oh no.
What? Oh dear. That letter must have been quite a long letter that you wrote to them.
Yes.
Oh my God.
They took it really well. There was no blame. It was just me processing what had happened.
Good.
So what about my third premise, which is that would you still be happy to continue as you were if you needed to put your children into a childcare setting, for example, for 2 days a week in order to run your business? Or is that at the point at which you would further simplify down?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I see lots of people asking for childminders on Facebook groups, like home-ed childminders, and I think that is such a great idea. If people don't seem to be able to find them to actually provide that, but I have considered that before. There's been times when the business has been quite intense, and I've thought, the children just need to be somewhere else for some of the time, so that I've got a bit more space, or me and my partner do. I think it's a great solution if it's if you can find a childcare setting that aligns with your values.
Thank you. I know they were difficult questions. Don't worry, I'll be piling difficult questions onto everybody. I'll be very fair with my difficult questions. One thing I'm really sensing is that we all chose jobs that fitted with our home education. So Kate, really right from the start, you chose a job that would fit with unschooling and raising children sort of outdoors and, you know, autonomous. And Claire, you actually adapted your existing business so that it fitted better with home education, because I think you said, didn't you, that you changed your business and you started home educating round about the same time.
Yeah.
And Veronica, exactly the same with you. You actually started your business when you were when the children were transitioning to college. And I know that for me, when my children got to the age when they were about 9 and 10, that's when I was able to study to do my master's with the long-term view of then being able to sort of support myself and have my own business. And so it's like we all put fairly careful thought into our business choices. So Claire, I've got a question for you. A hard one, because I like to spread them around. So Claire, if you weren't able to work from home, for example, would you be able to have taken your child out of school?
No, not with the kind of work that I do, because it's not the sort of thing I could have took him with me. And when he was a bit younger, his energy would have been quite disruptive. He wasn't able to, he found socializing incredibly difficult. So he, you know, if we were in groups where there was other children, he would just sit in the corner. We couldn't go to birthday parties because he would just sit outside with his hands over his ears saying, "Can I go home now?" So at that time, because of his additional needs that he had then, it would not have been possible. I would need to be home for him. So no, the answer there.
Do you ever feel that you yourself are missing out from not being able to go to work, for example? So you yourself perhaps feel more isolated or more lonely from not having maybe the school run, school mums at the gate, colleagues, that kind of thing? No, you're shaking your head.
I miss colleagues in the sense that if you're in a job where you get on with everybody, that's great. And there's been several times in my life when that's been the case. And I do miss the camaraderie of those days. But I find another way to fill that gap with my current friend group and family. So I think if I'd have had to, but with the other part of the question, which was do I miss the school run and the school gates? My experience of the types of people that were at the school gates wasn't particularly pleasant, and I tended to just drop the child and run as quickly as possible. So no, I don't miss that one iota.
Oh, see, my children never been to school, so I've got these rather halcyon ideas of mothers chatting happily and inviting each other around for coffee and stuff.
Me too.
They weren't my kind of people.
We'll leave it there, just in case they're listening, which I think is very unlikely to a home education podcast. Veronica, I've got a tough question for you then. And this is my last tough question. Don't worry, I won't ask lots more after this. Do you ever feel that when you were putting your business life on hold, do you look at all the work you're doing now and how much pleasure and enjoyment you get from it and feel a kind of seething resentment that you weren't able to do it 10 years ago? Or are you very zen about your choice?
Oh, I'm just so thankful, because I think I'm so thankful for those years that I had with the kids. I think I'm just so thankful because I think especially for children, I mean, I read quite a lot about children living abroad, third culture kids, things. And I just wanted to make sure that because it was a decision that we made about living abroad, I did not want the children I wanted them to have, good memories, but also feel supported. And you can do all you can, right? I mean, they're still, so they have been, we've had conversations. I'm not sure if I get a long letter, but we've had conversations and process it through with them. So we shall see.
I suspect as mothers, we're all going to get a long letter at some point in our life. Yeah, no matter how. My daughter pretty much sent it me this morning, actually. So pretty much, no matter how well we think we're doing, we're all going to get that.
I have boys, so I might get a text. Or...
You're very fortunate. Yeah. Yes, Claire, what are you going to say?
There's a saying in therapy, if it's not one thing, it's your mother.
Do you know, that is true, but really annoys me, because always as a life coach, I'm always so careful not to blame the parents, because I think particularly mothers, talk about broad shoulders. It's always our fault, always.
It's never blamed, because they had parents too.
Transgenerational, right? Although this is something that, Kate, you're stopping that transgenerational kind of thing, right? You're saying it stops at this generation and from here we unschool, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, trying to challenge that trauma and not pass it on any further. Yes.
That's nice. I like that idea. I do like that idea. In actual fact, I think we're all first generation homeschoolers, right? Or home educators. Yeah. Everyone's nodding. Yeah. I mean, there weren't that many, were there? Veronica, what are you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say too that you know, I think my years of home educating enable me to do what I do now, with the way I design and approach the classes. And so I think it's just drawing from that experience and giving it back, you know.
I love that, because that's actually going to lead me on to my next question, which is how many of us feel that our experience as home educators has impacted either the business we've chosen or how we run our business? Because I know from my perspective, I would never have considered becoming a life coach if I hadn't had children, because before that, I just was a pretty hard and cynical kind of person, and it's only really as I had children I grew to love people. So, which sounds terrible. Kate, what were you going to say?
For me, being a parent has been like the most amazing personal development journey. It has I think even before I discovered unschooling and that was what I wanted to take, it was bringing up so many different things, just challenges that I had to confront in just being a parent. And then when I started exploring unschooling and that freedom that I wanted my children to have, it has just challenged so much and had to like make me rethink so many different things, limiting beliefs, and shift all of that so that I can kind of come as pure to being a parent as possible, which is actually completely impossible. But
does it affect how you run your business? Do you kind of those autonomous principles, do you find they extend into your business in some ways?
Yeah, well, my coaching, I am supporting women to create the life of their dreams and to go back to their natural authenticity. So that is like completely related, because that's what we've kind of had layered on top of us from schooling, from parenting, and we have all of this baggage. And I'm trying to raise my children without all of that, or as much as I can. But I'm supporting women to remove that and to get back to their natural selves, so that they can then actually figure out what's most important to them and design their lives around that, rather than retiring and living with regrets and holding on to all of that. So,
in actual fact, I've got a question in a minute that I think will sort of I'd be very interested to get your perspective on then. But Claire, do you find that when you're designing your websites that somehow your home education experience infiltrates into your websites? Do you put little subliminal messages, unschooling, that kind of thing? No. I'm quite relieved, because I think that would be unethical.
Absolutely. No, I think, well, actually, maybe yes, but not in a way you would think. So not deliberate. So what it's done is it's made me understand how different ways people learn and take in information. And that has helped me learn and take in information in different ways in my business, and to provide that information to my clients in a way that suits them rather than how it should be done. So now I started off by following a model, which is how all the other website designers do, which is you ask the client what they like, what their favorite color is, what things they want, and then you go off and build it and you give it to them, and then they're stuck with it and they don't know what to do with it. And, you know, there's no other information. It's just like, here's your website, bye, sort of thing. And so the way I do it is it's a series of meetings that we have on Zoom where I'm coaching you for your website and we're recording it, because what happens is people sit down to type their about me or whatever and go, oh, I don't know what to say, or they'll type something out and it sounds too formal and it's not really their own true voice. But when I'm saying to them, okay, so why are you passionate about what you're doing? Tell me all about it and the people you've helped and give me some examples. And they goes, oh, it's amazing because blah, 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 blah. And all this amazing content comes out. And it came from coaching where I'm like, we should have recorded that. Because this is what you need to put on your website. This is the true you and the reason for doing it. And none of this other formal crap. Just be yourself, but in a professional way. And so I started offering that as a service where we just record it and I talk to you about what you do, and then I transcribe it afterwards and send you the content, and you have it ready-made in your own words.
So for you, Claire, one of the values you've taken from home education into your business is the importance of listening to people and sort of like respecting their voices. And for you, Kate, I get the impression that it's authenticity and being able to be your authentic self. And for me, it's very much all about autonomy. So for me, all my life coaching is very much focused on sort of empowering people to be autonomous. And I definitely get that from the home education. So what about you, Veronica? What value do you think from home education that you take forward into your business?
Oh, several. I think one aspect is, I mean, just taking on from what you've mentioned, autonomy, in terms of, for the children in my classes, I often get asked, oh, is it okay if I, whatever, is it okay if I do it in this way? I said, of course it is. I said, even if you don't see if we're doing bears and, you just don't, feel like doing a bear and you want to make it into that bear inspires you to do something else, then go for it and run with it. And to just see the joy on their faces. And we've been doing bears lately. And so one of the girls has been saying, I really feel like giving this, we were doing panda, I really feel like giving this bear a jacket, I said, yeah, go for it. And what was interesting was that sort of sparked off some ideas in others. And that's what happens in the class. But what I tried lately was I was telling another group, oh, in this other group, this girl, she wanted to give the bear a jacket. And that sort of, there was one child in each class, this one child would actually do that, and they interpreted it and what gave it something else. And it's just been fascinating seeing that. So they take on, the children are given that, to be creative, to explore their artistic voice. So that's one thing. And I think the other aspect is, especially I noticed in the teenage years where, it got quite lonely at one point, and especially for my older child. And so I felt that, no, this is what I wanted to do, to give a platform, a way for children to connect with other home ed children. So all my classes are live and they're interactive. And I'm often known for my laughter, it says, oh, Veronica, your laughter, And so I've got children who, if they go on holiday, I mean, within reason, if they go on holiday, they would join in on location wherever they are because they don't want to miss the class. They just don't want to. And I believe it's not so much of what I deliver, but the atmosphere and the being able to connect and to just get ideas and be inspired by each other. And I just love that collaborative nature. But yet giving the children to choose what they want to take on, not just from me, but from each other, and something that somebody says sparks up an idea, and it's just wonderful to be together. And we're all different. There's some that are really quiet, some that I just have to just press the mute button for a little bit so that somebody else gets a chance, so yeah, just having that. And I think, just facilitating that. So for me, that's key.
That's great. So I think probably, you're talking there, the values of creativity and embracing non-conformity as well, right? Allowing a child to, absolutely. I mean, and if you can't do that in art, you can't do it anywhere, can you? Because art is wonderfully non-conformist. And my final question for you all is all about imposter syndrome. Because I was talking to another home ed mum the other day, and I was telling her that I was writing an article and something like that. And she looked at me with a wry smile and she said, "You don't suffer from imposter syndrome, do you?" And I kind of went, should I? No, should I be? And it occurred to me that a lot of women of our age do suffer from imposter syndrome and do find it difficult to sort of say, I'm good at this, I'm doing this, I'm managing this, I'm handling this. And I wonder whether anyone else here sort of has any experience of imposter syndrome. And I know, Kate, you were talking a little bit about, sort of empowering women to be themselves and to sort of acknowledge who they are. And I think a lot of imposter syndrome must come into that a lot, right?
Yeah, it certainly does. Yeah. And I think, I've experienced it at all different stages of business and home ed, imposter syndrome, and comparing myself to people that are full-time home edding. Definitely feeling like, that I don't have the capacity or the capability to do it all. Yeah.
Do you not feel that you're a full-time home educator then?
I do. I feel like I'm a full-time everything.
Everything.
Yeah. But I'm not able to give my children the hands-on time that someone who has no other kind of income earning responsibilities does. So it can be really hard to compare. Yeah. I actually maybe 4 years ago, I joined a homeschool business owning membership in America because I couldn't find anyone here who I could share that side of my life with, because I felt like everybody was going off to all these things and I was getting messages like, let's go to the beach, let's do this. And we've kind of got our week quite neatly designed and kind of we've got our rhythms, and there's only certain days when we can actually go and do adventures, but we design that in as a crucial part of our lives. But it means that when my parents have them on a Friday, they can't go to the beach with some friends because my parents have got their plans and they're doing their thing. And so I feel like sometimes they're missing out on different sides that they could do. But my response to that was actually to design or to create an unschooling community for our family to kind of center around, so that we had this core group of people that we were meeting up with every week on a day that we knew worked for us every week. And so I've had to put a lot of energy into creating that, and it's just been the most beautiful community of people that have come together over the last year. And so the gap that I felt in my unschooling life and feeling like imposter syndrome that I couldn't really achieve what I wanted to in that side, figured out a solution to it.
So what you've done to sort of banish your imposter syndrome is evidence-based. You've kind of created situations and problem solved your way around that, rather than sort of maybe sort of counteracting the mindset issue so much.
Oh, well, there's so much mindset work going on behind the scenes every single day. Journaling is just part of my daily life. There's a lot of that for sure. But I just took control of the situation and took action to make something happen. So I identified a gap and where I didn't feel like I was showing up in the way that I wanted to, and then found a solution. That's
good. That, in actual fact, that's quite often what you have to do in home education, right? If the group doesn't exist, you create it. Claire.
Imposter syndrome in the tech world is rife because it's full of experts. So as soon as you say you can do something, then you're automatically good at tech. And there's just such a vast amount of it, you can't possibly know all of it. So in my networking circles, I was always introduced as the tech guru or the expert on this or the expert on that. And I used to feel myself visibly shrinking in my chair going, don't call me that, because someone might find out that there's this one program that someone wrote somewhere that I don't understand. And that therefore doesn't make me an expert. So I used to really panic about it. And I spoke to my own coach about it. And she said, so why don't you just put that on your website? Why don't you just say that you're an expert in some areas, but not in all of them? So feel free to ask me anything. And if I don't know the answer, I'll let you know. And I was like, oh, that's so simple.
That was about just being honest about who you are and who you're not.
Yeah.
What about you, Veronica? Have you ever found yourself?
Tremendous. It's taken us. Art has been. It's interesting because I've always loved art. Just never had the opportunity to pursue it and do. And then in the last, few years before we came back, I knew that we were going to leave, and there was a grieving process, and I wanted to give myself a permission to grieve that we would be leaving. And so I began to draw things that I loved and that I liked about the culture, food, things that I will miss when we come back to cold England and things. And people were saying, oh, this is really, really pretty. This is really nice. You should sell it. Things like that. And I always thought, no. I always felt I'm not good enough. This is not right. And so then I began researching about, began following artists and things. And then I began to see this, that amongst women, about our age or your age really, and older or younger, who were beautiful artworks. And they began talking about this whole thing about imposter syndrome. Just talking about never feeling it's good. And I think, goodness, this is rife. This is not just me. And working through that, really working through that. And now with the children in the classes, and I noticed that with just having read, usually if you think about it, children just love drawing, right? As toddlers and stuff, but they get to a certain age, 8, 9, 10, depending, especially when they hit puberty. It's like, oh, this is not good. I have one child that says, oh, this is a complete fail. And she's been in the class for nearly 2 years. And she knows my normal line. And I say there's no such thing as a fail. And she just smiles, she just knows I would always say that. But recently another girl has just joined in, and she's just very direct, and so after a few weeks, this girl, this girl saying, oh, it's a complete fail. And I said, oh, come on, I always say that there's no such thing as a fail. And this other girl says, why are you always so negative? She was just so direct. And this other girl needed to hear that, and she took it really well, because she's funny and very direct and things. And it's just fascinating. And actually the more women, obviously talk about it. In fact, that we can talk about it, imposter syndrome, and we talk about it. And especially in the art world, it's just tremendous. I recently bought this book, The Story of Art by Kate Symonds, but it says Without Men. I don't know if you've seen this. And it's just being, she's just writing about from one perspective. Obviously, all history books have a certain bias, a certain point. So she's going through the centuries. Not exhaustive, obviously, but about women in art, and it's just fascinating to see, the resistance that women have had to do. In all parts, and the resilience of women. And so for me, I feel that it's such joy with art in my art classes, because I'm enabling these children to see it's okay what I do, it's fine. And it may not be like Picasso or whatever, it doesn't matter. We all start somewhere. And I love showing them sketches of artists and say, look, at that. And recently at the National Gallery, there's this amazing painting by Manet, and of another artist, Eva Gonzalez, and we don't hear much about her, but it's this beautiful, huge, massive piece. And the National Gallery did some an X-ray of the piece, and you can actually see the places where he had actually scraped off the oils. And I was showing it to the children. I said, look at that. Look at the number of times he corrected that piece, and apparently that painting took about at least 30 sittings, And they were like, oh, wow. And I said, it's like seeing the places where he erased, what we would have erased. And to see their faces light up, that it's okay, it's okay. Even someone who produced such amazing artworks.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that the basis of our unschooling is being life learners. And that has given me permission to take on that role for myself. And to see that I'm not going to be an expert at anything like on day one. I'm going to start up this business and I'm going to figure it out as I go along. One of the projects we took on in 2018 was to build a straw bale roundhouse from basically the ground up with our hands, and not knowing what we were doing. And the kids came along with us. It took us like 2.5 years. And we keep coming across people who say, what made you want to do that? Like, why did you start? Did you have the skills? No, you just figure it out. You just learn as you go, but you've got to take action. And so, yeah, I kind of remind myself when I get that imposter syndrome that I'm not going to be an expert. I was born with like none of this knowledge. All I have is like my own kind of authenticity. And then I've just got to learn and be a life learner.
Off the back of both of you there, it's that a question came up for me is natural talent just fearless mistakes in disguise?
I think every artist would say yes to that. One thing I think comes through from what Veronica was saying, but also I think perhaps what we all experience, is that I think mothers in particular struggle to monetize things that they do, because so much of what we do isn't paid and isn't societally valued in a kind of monetary way. And I wonder whether to a degree there's an element of that fear of wanting to charge for what we do, and that fear of saying, yes, it has value and it is worthy, I'm worth being paid. And I wonder whether that links into imposter syndrome for anyone. I mean, it doesn't for me, because I don't have it, as was clearly made apparent. But I wonder if for other people, maybe they feel that link between, should I actually be charging for this? Claire.
Yeah, I think I've definitely seen it in myself and in a lot of my clients, for sure. I think that's probably what the crux of imposter syndrome is, isn't it? It just comes from, I'm not good enough. And if you don't feel good enough with what you're doing, then you wouldn't feel good enough to charge for it. Why would anyone else pay for it? That sort of thing. And I've helped a lot of people through that, because you've spent your entire life learning to be who you are now. And that's a bloody good value. And so I quite often take people back to like early childhood and say, what was you interested in? What did you like? What life lessons have you learned? And I just build up this portrait of this person who's been life educated, not just academically educated. And we look at all of it and the value in that. And for sole traders, who I mostly deal with, sole traders and small businesses, it's much easier because you are your business. And there isn't another you. So you absolutely are the best at being that. You just need to learn about that and see where that came from and recognise it, that there isn't any competition.
Yeah, that is so true. And I think that is such a good point to make. Before we finish, I wonder whether everybody could... There'll be people listening who want to home educate, but perhaps feel that they can't because they'd have to leave their job, or that they worry about how they would do it financially, or they worry about how they would juggle running their own business and home educating. So I wonder if you could each say something, like 1 or 2 lines, to these people who might be listening, who might be thinking, they're doing it, but I can't do it because I can't run websites and I don't have 20 acres to build a glamping site, and my children aren't off to college yet, for example, or I haven't done a master's or whatever. They might be thinking to compare themselves to us. And I wonder whether there's any reassurance or support that anyone could think of to give them. I'll go first to give you all time to think. So I suppose what I would say is that for anyone listening, try to focus on what you can do rather than what you haven't got, or any limitations, or any circumstances that maybe aren't, so instead of thinking, I don't have this, I can't do that, think about all the things you can do and all the things you do have. Because when you flip it that way, when you shift your mindset that way, there's so many things that we have that are of value, so many characteristics and qualities that we have that can be monetized and are worthy of being monetized. So I suppose that's what I would say. So would anyone else like to give some words of advice to any listeners who might be on the fence about it? Veronica.
I'd say that the home ed community is so huge, and there's so many, it's grown so much over the years, and I think there's just ask, don't be afraid to ask. And if it's you can't get your answer in one group, try another group, and just build that network and ask. So
that's true. We're all here to support everyone else. And sometimes the home education groups can be a bit scary, but if you pick the right ones, they're generally, everyone's very lovely. Sometimes they're slightly less lovely, but normally they're very lovely. Claire, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, so I think for me, my advice would be both of the things that you guys have said already, but also along with, ask yourself, if you're thinking of this as an option, there's a reason why. How important is that why?
I like that.
I like that too. Yeah.
Because if you need it enough, you'll find a way.
It reminds me of that bad film with Kevin Costner. It was like, if you plant it, they will grow, or something.
Oh,
no, wait, if you grow it, they will come, or I don't even know.
Well, it's not that simple, but
I don't want to end the podcast on a Kevin Costner quote, so Kate, please save us.
I think the key is to get really creative and to think differently. If you're wanting to home educate, that's different to what everybody around you is typically doing, then it requires thinking differently and thinking creatively and getting outside of the box a bit and finding a way to make it work. And you've all got, as you three have already said, there's so many skills, there's so many different ways of making it work, but it's got to come from, if it's important to you, get creative and make it happen. Don't regret it.
That is much better than a Kevin Costner quote. That is a Kate quote. So we'll end on a Kate quote. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. It was really lovely. And for anyone listening, there is a Facebook group called Home Education Businesses, which is full of all of us who basically home educate and run a business. And it's my group, so I can guarantee it's nice because I run it and make sure it is. And of course, we have the Home Education Matters Facebook group for anyone who would like to come on and chat with any of our guests today. So thank you so much, Claire. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Kate, for the inspiring quote at the end. And for all of your other contributions. So thank you, everybody. And I hope everyone's enjoyed listening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's Home Education Matters podcast. See you at the next one. Have a lovely day.